Not there yet.
Okay. All right. I would like to call this meeting to order on October 19th, 2020, special board meeting of the Woodford County Board of Education. Let the record show that Ms. Evelyn and Mr. Wilson are attending virtually. Ms. Springate and myself are in person, and Ms. Richardson was unable to attend. Do we have any public comment? There's no public comment. So we will move on to the next item, which will be our Instructional Equity Task Force update from Mr. Asher, please.
Good. Yeah. Hello, good evening. As far as the instructional update, which also includes equity and task force, kind of all be combined here. I'll differentiate when we're on different topics. As far as instructional, two main things that I'm going to do is we're going to revisit and go back to the CDIP, the Comprehensive District Improvement Plan. This particular plan, which I'll go over here in just a minute, dates several years back as it was designed to be a 3 to 5 year plan. And so most of this work was led by Mr. Brim and the team that helped develop this. So I'm kind of just picking up where he left off, so to speak. Obviously, the circumstances over the last several months have not allowed us to do our regular updates as we would on the CDIP, but here we are to pick it back up. I will note that we are getting ready to enter the season of the development of the 21 plan. A lot of these same items will carry over. The items of this plan will carry over. They'll be revised, be updated, but we are getting ready to enter in the work to develop the 2021 plan. For those of you online, Mr. Wilson, Ms. Evelyn, we did email the copy of this that I'm going through. It's 3 slides that are printed out, and that's what I'll be referring to as we go through here. So the first one that you have there, you see a couple photos of Woodford County students to the right, but what I've highlighted there are 2 specific areas. There are 4 overall, but we're going to look at 2 of those tonight, support services and technology, and what the objectives are and the critical initiatives. If you turn to the next page, we'll look at the first one we're highlighting tonight, which is support services. And there are 3 activities, as I mentioned, 2 of which, you got the arrows, if you follow the arrows there, deal with specific student supports. The first of which is called ISF. We like to talk acronyms, of course, in education, but that stands for Interconnected Systems Framework. And so here are a few bullet points that describe the progress we've made with our ISF work. And just so you know what that means, the whole focus is to incorporate mental health and wellness through all tiers. So for all students, which we refer to as Tier 1, and then into Tier 2 and 3 for students that need more supports in those particular areas. So when we left off, it was Ms. Sellers was helping to lead this work and develop some partnerships with community agencies. That has since been done. Ms. Tracy has been involved in that as well, and actual MOUs have been created. They probably have come across your desk, I would assume, through board meeting and through board approval. So we do have those partnerships established that will help us with some outside counseling and therapy services. Community member meetings were held regularly, monthly, I believe. This was before I was on board, but of course, due to COVID, that was interrupted. But they are scheduled to begin again next month. The district structures that we have, both as a district and at the school level, are continuously improving. As we are a national pilot district, then we do our work with Kentucky A-Breed. So I was involved, sat in with Ms. Oates and Ms. Tracy today, in meeting with our rep from A-Breed, Megan Martin, to talk about those next steps. One thing we're excited about, you'll see very soon, is going live with this website. I can't recall if I mentioned in this group in my update last month, but what this will be is a collective location on our website. It'll be very prominent. We discussed this in cabinet the other day that it'll have a specific button. You won't have to, before some of this, you would have to go to a certain department. It would take several clicks to get there. This will be a prominent button on the very front page of our webpage, which will have, and I know you can't see that there, but have a number of supports, both mental health and wellness. Our equity work will live there, as there's a specific button that is labeled as diversity and equity. So it'll be a one-stop shop for a variety of resources. So Ms. Oates put that together initially, has worked with Ms. Bailey in terms of getting a logo for that button that I mentioned and going live with that very soon. So we're excited about that. In terms of PBIS, the next heading there, we continue and we're going to resume that work. Part of that, the reason, well, we know the reason why we had to stop that work, but we were looking at our behavior data monthly, and we needed to address some increases in our behavior data. So this was still when I was in the principal role. We were looking at that monthly, all the schools collectively, and what do we need to do at Tier 2 and Tier 3 for behavior interventions? Obviously, that was interrupted, and even during the interruption, and since we've come back, our behavior data looks much different. When students are online, it's not the same. Your behavior management's a little bit different. So we are resuming that work, and at this point, our counselor, along with some support from our district level staff, will be identifying what are specific Tier 2 and 3 behavior interventions we want in our toolbox, and therefore selecting those and doing the training on those to be prepared when we are fully back to normal, so to speak, and able to meet students' needs there. The middle one, you'll see there coded, I think it's blue on yours, I don't have a color copy. It's about our cultural responsiveness work and through our equity team. Just left our monthly meeting just before this, and I'm really proud of this work and the group that we have right now. They're very engaged in the work. They have a much deeper level of understanding due to all of these things that I mentioned when I say, well, that you all were part of. When we did the whole CQ assessment, it just has created such a deeper level of awareness and understanding that we can engage in this work. So we just had a fantastic meeting. I think I mentioned last month that we have identified 4 priorities within our action plan, and so we were able to update on each of those and what we want to do moving forward. And a couple of those are mentioned right there and where we're headed with that. One particular one, which is bulleted there, are the visual representations in our schools. Again, it's a level of awareness. Now people, they're thinking about that. They're cognizant of that. And I was able to tour several of the schools to look specifically for this, or I had them send me pictures. And I compared that to our original audit and pictures that they took. And there were several things, maybe 2 or 3 instances or examples that they had, the whatever it takes team, whereas this time I was upwards of 20. I had to cut the list, so to speak. And so we were able to look at, and this is something we're going to post on back to the website we mentioned, the different examples of diversity and cultural responsiveness that we have in our building. So again, I'm really proud of this work, the awareness, and the depth at which we're engaging in that. Any questions about that support services and the updates I've given so far?
I think it'd probably be easiest to kind of go around the horn here.
Sure.
Ms. Springate, do you have any questions or comments?
I don't have any questions. I would just say that it's really amazing that even though we've had the interruptions with the pandemic and with the in-person services, I feel like, this work just hasn't sat on a side table. I know you've been putting out the fires, but it feels like every month you guys are still just doing the day-to-day things that we need to improve continuously as a district, and I really appreciate that. I'm so excited for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Springate.
I haven't muted it.
Ms. Evelyn, do you have any questions or comments?
No.
Okay. Mr. Wilson, do you have any questions or comments?
No, but Danny, I can hardly hear you.
Okay. Is that better?
Much better, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
A lot of Mr. Asher's kind of froze up. I don't know, the feed froze up or something, but I think we got most of it. So.
Thank you, Mr. Asher.
Thank you.
I did have one question. I wondered if you and Ms. Tracy feel like we have adequate support for the mental health needs of our students now after reaching out and joining with some of those other groups.
I would say yes. We're still, I'm a big structure person, so we're still about structuring and how Once there is a need, how do we link that up? So that's a process we're still working on. But to answer your question, I would say yes. Do you concur?
Yes, I would agree.
That's great.
I think one of the things that we're going to have to be kind of continually looking at is right now the outside counseling and outside services, a lot of that is still virtual. And I think what we'll have to gauge is there a need for some in-person type of support that maybe is not available at this point in time that we may need to bridge that gap.
And is that something we currently have the ability? No.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
And so again, I think we will be able to better gauge that as we go along, but that is a concern that I have, is that I am so glad we have the many partnerships that we have, but many of them are not coming in person yet.
Okay.
And so I think that's something that we'll have to continue to look at.
Well, and I think we will count on you to keep us informed on that. I agree that being mindful of our students' mental health needs through this is something that's extremely important. The other question I had is, I believe Mr. Wilson has been the board representative on the equity audit team. We need to look at who will replace him on that, and
we talked about that. We got a plan.
Okay.
We mentioned that we looked at our membership, and by the way, Piper, we talked. We have our students to add. Piper is one of them.
Wonderful.
Our next step is and Ms. Wilson is facilitating this, to meet with them first, just to give them some background, and they'll be joining us in November. As far as adding a board rep, we talked about once the new board members are on in January, I would be coming to you to ask for a representative.
Perfect.
Among your team.
That sounds great. I just wanted to make sure we were thinking about that, and we can figure that out then.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, we'll go to the next one, the final page that you have there, technology. The first circle there on the left, what color is it? Blue?
Red.
Red?
Red.
There we go. Or the blue with the arrow. So that first one talks about the training and supporting staff members to fully utilize the benefits of technology. And as you see there over where that arrow is over to the right, well, we had to last spring. It was a necessity, as I mentioned there. The good thing is that we had the infrastructure to support that. There were multiple places that I read of that they were just trying to get the technology in students' hands. Luckily, we were able to do that very quickly. And so that, therefore, then increased the use of tech resources and skills. And at that point, I'm going all the way back to last March and into April and May, that district and school staff selected different types of resources and programs, and we were able to provide the training and support that learning throughout. And here are just examples of a few things that, one of which I'll mention, you see literacy footprints. We had that resource in our elementary schools, a tangible, those are books, and we went digital with that. And as you probably would assume, or may even have seen, a lot of these companies obviously are doing that to support the need for technology resources. So we were certainly able to continue that. And then the second one there talks about foundational skills. So this would refer to our elementary tech curriculum. And this was developed, I want to say year before last or full go into last year, to where teachers had to make sure that they were incorporating these skills. I don't think they had to make sure, because all of these things that you'll see listed here had to be practiced in remote virtual instruction. So when I looked at the list of different skills, of course they were collaborating. Of course they were practicing digital citizenship and keyboarding and just general tech skills. So again, we were able to adapt quickly, but having that infrastructure and then that extra practice or engagement in the technology helped support that curriculum. Any questions on the technology update?
We'll go around again. Ms. Springate?
I have been on a couple of updates and webcasts from KDE and KSBA lately, and one of the things that every time I'm on one, I feel like we are so blessed in Woodford that we were already one-to-one with technology and that we were already working on these things even before the pandemic. So I do feel like that helped, especially listening to some of the horror stories from other districts, really kind of helped us be able to, hit the ground running and provide an excellent education and services over the past few months. So I would just say, I'm very proud to be part of a district that is thinking of these things so that if, God forbid, crises ever hit like this, we're in a good position. And I just really appreciate that. Not all districts have that. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Springate. Ms. Evelyn?
I think you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Asher. I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Neither do I, Ms. Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Asher, the question I guess I would have is, are we doing this as part of your instructional update, or are we doing that separately too?
Doing
The technology specific parts. I just wondered if you could tell us some of the measures that you guys have implemented on the virtual instruction.
Yep, and yes, I was going to that next.
Okay.
Anything else on the CDIP update?
No, it looks great. Thank you. And I would echo Ms. Springgate's thanks for being as prepared as we were and as great as it has been with the one-to-one devices. You see other districts are on backlog waiting lists that are miles long. I'm very appreciative and grateful to our county and our taxpayers and our teachers and staff for having all of those things in place. Mr. Hawkins, did you have any? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes. Outside of the CDIP update, I did intend to give you just an overall on Virtual Academy, and I'll go by the level. Elementary, and let me say first off, since we've gone in person on 9/28, our team, the CNI team, have focused mainly on virtual. A lot of our time, there we go. Most of our time, I would say, is working to ensure that our virtual academies, K through 12, are working the very best that they can. So I do have a few updates on you. At the elementary, if you recall, when at the 28th, the major thing we had to work through was combining of classes and students and schools and working our way through all of those logistics. So the teachers, 16 teachers, have done an excellent job of reestablishing relationships. It was kind of like first day of school again, first day of virtual school again, because students had to learn their expectations and they just had to get to know one another. So they're, 2 weeks in now? And doing very well with that. The major thing that we're working through is resources, both technology resources. So for example, if there's a program that was used at Northside, just a supplementary tech program, but maybe not used at Huntertown, and now they're in the same class, how can we make sure that we have licenses for those students? So the technology resources. And then you also have the tangible resources. So Mr. Albert, myself, Mr. Albert is the dean at the middle school who's overseeing all of K through 8 Virtual Academy. We had to collect those tangible resources. We're talking about books and whiteboards and workbooks, and make sure that those made their way back to the home school for those students to pick up. So tomorrow actually is a scheduled pickup day, where a virtual student may, and it's not for all, it's just if they didn't already have this resource, we'll have to pick that up at the school. If they're not able to, then we'll arrange for delivery to those students. But that's been the major thing with elementary is connecting to these kids once again, and then also just making sure we have the resources to support those teachers. At middle school, and I've mentioned this here before, it's been very helpful for them to do a weekly to-do list. They started this at week 2, even back to August when we started, and they task out by the day what students have to do. So that is helpful overall when we consider Tier 1 what all students have to do. But beyond that, teachers offer office hours daily, and they can schedule one-on-one meets with individual students as requested or needed. They are beginning what's called ESS, Extended School Services, Tiger Up on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So after school via Google Meets, and for a specific content area, a student can sign up or be assigned to participate in that. They've also conducted home visits, and that is primarily done by the team of teachers as well as the administration. As needed for students that are significantly behind, they're developing individualized plans for those students. And then one thing that they did, which actually would have started today, is for middle school, they're entering the second 9-week term. So they offer the option to drop their exploration classes so that they could reduce their workload if they choose. They had the option to drop those altogether, to keep one class, or to stay in both. The reason for this is that it's just hard to support on really both sides of that, both the teacher and student side, given that those teachers are dedicated mainly to in-person now, those exploration teachers. At last, you may have to help me with this with the percentages, I believe 40%-ish had opted to drop both. You remember the rest of the breakdown?
I want to say it was 34. 34 sticks out that maybe dropped one.
Okay.
And then the other percentage of students
16? No.
Decided to keep both.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the ones that are staying in, it's primarily band, chorus, some ag courses, some very specific interest, really, that they're opting in. So the major purpose of that was to reduce their workload, but at the same time, it was hard to support that moving forward. So that's an update on middle school. As far as high school, the focus at this point, and this is, like I said, our team been working with the high school, gathering data and developing tiered levels of support. I mentioned the structure that we often use is MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. So for all students, there is a content, and I've mentioned this before, that they can reach out to their advisor. I got more specifics on that and what that looks like. So there's a content help ticket process that they do. And they have a whole Bitmoji classroom where these things can be found, and click on this, and this is how I get help. To request tutoring, either to retake a quiz or a test, or just simply they need help in a content area beyond their advisor teacher. And so far, the numbers on that, 594 of those have been set up and completed as those help tickets. So that was good to get some data back. Beyond the weekly check-in that advisors do, they're required to check in at a base level, so to speak, with all of their students on their caseload. There are additional contacts to the student and parent via email or phone call. We're really encouraging phone call beyond the email because sometimes those go unanswered. So they're making a real effort, relentless effort, as Ms. Forgy said, to make sure we get them on the phone and update them on progress. Also, Google Meets with the counselor. Ms. Wilson is a designated counselor, and there have been multiple of those set up. I mentioned home visits for middle school. Those have been done at the high school as well. And I was able to track this just since 9/28 when we went dual entry. Approximately 24 of those have been done since 9/28. So that excluding fall break, obviously. They also held a parent night for Spanish-speaking families of virtual academy students on the 12th. The 15 families attended, so that was both a parent and a student. To overcome the language barrier was part of it, because we noticed on a lot of the contacts, teachers make notes on their contacts, they said that an interpreter was needed. So Carmen Wilcox, Sarah Rawl, their team stepped in and arranged for this night to be held last week. Coming up, and you may have even seen this publicized, there are two other levels of support that they're putting in. First, what's called a homework help, So that's similar to what I mentioned on middle school as far as ESS. So that's in-person tutoring for all content areas. So that's after school. So a virtual student can come in person after school on those designated days, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, to get content area help. What we also want to do is give them a virtual option. So that's called Hop On for Help. And there are scheduled times during the school day that in-person teachers are hosting meets that a student can get content area help, and they're divvied out by content area. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but math on Monday and Wednesday, ELA on Tuesday, Thursday, so on and so forth. So wanted to come back with some very specific supports that we have planned. Not done yet. Still have to structure these, still have to watch our data, what students are not engaging at all, and what more can we do? But we are continuing to work with the high school and their virtual academy staff to do that. Any questions about virtual academy and where we stand?
Ms. Frigate? It sounds amazing. I know there had to be adjustments since we were planning this, back at the end of last year, June, July. But I am so appreciative of all of the extra above and beyond. It sounds like the teachers and the staff and the administration has done. These resources sound amazing, including the counseling resources you spoke about earlier and that new button that people are making sure that it's easy to click on and find all the resources. This just sounds far above and beyond what I'm reading and seeing that, virtual academies look like. So I appreciate that we didn't just do the baseline virtual academy, that we've gone really above and beyond with all different levels, with behavior, with mental health support, with homework help, with teacher and staff time. It's really amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Springate. Ms. Evelyn? You're on mute, Ms. Evelyn.
You're on mute.
So on the content help, and Ryan, please forgive me because it was kind of hard to hear, so when they try to get content help, are they going to one of our teachers?
Yes.
Are they going to an Edgenuity site?
No, one of our teachers, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned 594 have been completed, what exactly were you talking about? Was that the content?
So that process, that way for students to get help was established back when we started. I can't remember dates anymore, sorry. It was a help ticket that they had to do. It was a Google form to say, I need help in this given subject. And so 594 of those were completed and facilitated, that they were set up with a content teacher to get them over the hump, so to speak.
Okay, so those were the things that you would submit and then maybe hear back the next day. Is that right?
Yeah.
So on the content help, is it a little bit more immediate if somebody's stuck in the middle of an assignment or?
Well, they would be at scheduled times. So it could be immediate that you have both a during the day option and after school. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Evelyn.
Right, thank you for the report and thank you for the extra things you're doing for trying to meet the needs of our virtual students. Just two questions, please. At our last meeting, I asked the question about internet connectivity, and superintendent said that some things have not come in yet. Have those parts or those aids arrived yet, and have they been distributed to the children?
Yes, Bob and his team have those all out. The last we spoke about, that was the end of last week, Bob, when there was one student, or one parent and student that had reached out to us that we were trying to facilitate internet access for them, and that was simply because they lived in a very remote area, southern part of the county, where even a MiFi device wouldn't help them. I think so we were trying to find them a location here in town where they could come daily and get that access. I think Mother has found another route through her phone. These things can get complicated, but we rectified that, and they do have internet access daily now.
Okay, that's wonderful. And then my second question is, to the best of your knowledge, have we had any middle school or high school virtual students who have either transferred to homeschool or other counties?
I'm aware of a couple. I do not have exact numbers, but I will just say a couple homeschool situations. I'm not aware of any going to other districts.
Okay, and then something for next week. I don't want to ask you tonight because I don't think you probably have that information. But if you could give me the number of virtual students by each school and the number of meals by each school that are being distributed, and I'll have some follow-up questions next week, okay?
So number of virtual students by school and then meals distributed?
By school.
Okay, very good, yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is that meals for virtual kids?
I think he'll want, yeah,
Yeah,
the virtual
distributed,
students.
so I assume that's what.
Be the meal bags. How many
Yeah.
meal bags do we do?
Okay, thank you, Ryan. I've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
Do you feel like we are at a good spot with our continuity of instruction for virtual and in-person, given the number of increasing COVID cases rising nationally, that if we did have to go to all virtual, we're in the best spot we possibly can be?
I would say yes. It is all very complicated, right? It is all very complicated. It is all very complex. And we are on both sides of that. As I mentioned, most of our recent time has been spent on the virtual side, but we're always looking at, okay, what can we do better? How can we meet more needs? What do we need to do to support it? If we had to, yes, I would be comfortable. And that goes back to the CDIP update that I gave, that we were able to then, and even probably more so now, turn on a dime to make that adjustment. I hope that we don't, because we've seen a lot of success with our in-person logistics and what we're able to offer there. But to answer your question, yes, we would be able to do that.
Good. The next thing, I would like to thank everyone who worked together to develop these supports for the middle and high school students and the elementary, but I know that it's been a lot of emphasis for our middle and high school students. I did see the announcements of all of the new things that we have to offer here at the high school, and I think those are kind of exactly what parents have really been hoping for, so I really am hopeful that those will be nice bridges for our virtual students to get that help that they need. I wondered, not having a high school student anymore, I don't know, did a one call about those services go out? Or if not, could we do in one call? I know some parents aren't on Facebook, may not have seen that this is available. And I also wondered about emailing the two things that I assume Miss Bailey made that were really nice and positive and engaging. I wondered if we could email that to our parents and students just so everybody knows here are these things that are available to help. Please take advantage of them.
Sure. I'm not aware of either side if they did either of those.
Through Infinite Campus, through the virtual academy students, they've got that communication system set up.
Messenger.
Is it possible to send it to their parents as well?
Email. That's who that goes to.
Okay.
Yeah, it's emails that are within IC, and subgroup of those to distribute information.
Perfect.
So if it hasn't been done already, that would be our avenue to do that.
I can give you email as well. It's on our website for anyone who's not on social media. And then we can certainly do a one call and an email.
I think that's great. I think just making the public aware that it's happening is the.
And I do know, I think on Friday it was sent to all teachers to be telling their students about in class.
Okay, from Mr. Wilson and Miss Evelyn, Miss Bailey said that the teachers have also sent that out to parents so that they could be aware that these programs are available.
Good.
That's great. Thank you all to all of our virtual teachers, all of our in-person teachers who are taking those meets during the day. Thank you very much for all of your time and commitment to our students. And I know I speak for the board when I say we are very thankful for their hard work.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Asher.
Danny, Piper might have something to add. Being a student, you sometimes have a good perspective for us, Piper. Do you have anything to add?
Nothing really that anybody else hasn't said. In school, I just see our teachers working so hard. I mean, you can feel that they want to help us, they want to help their virtual kids, they want to help everybody. So teachers watching this, thank you all. You're awesome.
Thank you, Ms. McCown. All right, we'll move on to the next item, Mr. Hawkins, is a salary discussion.
If you don't mind, if we could jump to item C.
I don't mind at all.
We have a guest here. Mr. Wilson and Ms. Evelyn both expressed some concern about our ventilation at the last meeting. And after that, Mr. Martello and I met with Russ Crawford from CMTA to look at some different things that could be considered that would improve. I don't know if I would say it would improve the ventilation as much as it would enhance the systems that we have in terms of being able to protect against the virus. And so we had a nice conversation with Russ Crawford, again, who's an engineer who's worked with us on several HVAC projects in the district. Russ could not be here, but Matt Wade is here and can talk a little bit about the different options that maybe folks are considering right now, and potentially one that if as we talked with Russ, probably the one that may be the most viable option for us to, if we wanted to look in that direction. So, Matt, I'll kind of turn it over to you.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes, Mr. Wilson.
The superintendent is very hard to hear. I can hear you a lot easier than I can him. If I could ask a question, was the board architect involved in these discussions, Superintendent?
No.
Mr. Wilson, he said he was not.
Yes.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Wade.
Yes, thank you guys so much for having me. So just again, as Mr. Hawkins stated, he had asked us to kind of come up with a series of recommendations based on the guidance that's out there nationally. So we came up with a list of these recommendations and reviewed them. Just a quick note about this guidance. There's no HVAC system, and we talked about this with Mr. Hawkins, that can prevent the spread of COVID-19. Obviously, all CDC and state and national guidance and recommendations need to be followed with regards to the assembly of large groups of people in any form, but the recommendations assembled here really serve only to supplement these measures with a building's permanently installed HVAC system. So there are things that you can do to help, but it's really just a supplement to the other things we're already doing, like social distancing and wearing masks. These are just kind of supplementary things. The other thing to note about this is it's not an easy solution. You all have probably read articles or things in the New York Times and news outlets that give you an idea of the approaches that you have to take to combat this. And they really fall into 4 categories. The 4 categories are increasing your filtration, so getting finer particle filters that catch more of the stuff in the air. Increased ventilation, so increasing the amount of outside air that you bring into a building. And the last thing are disinfection. There are certain devices that you can buy which will help to disinfect and clean the air at a deeper level. And the last one is humidity control, just controlling the level of moisture in the air is been proven to help prevent the spread of viruses in closed areas like building facilities for a school. So at the end of the day, after reviewing the district's existing facilities, and the CMTA has a long relationship with Woodford County Schools with regards to their facilities. So after reviewing their existing facilities extensively, the best value-added recommendation that we can make is to go with the disinfection type option. There is a technology, it's a new and emerging technology called bipolar ionization. But essentially this involves installing a small device inside each of the air handling units throughout the district, which produces ions that have been proven and have been utilized certainly for many years in the containment of dust and particles to help asthma sufferers and things of that nature. There have been several laboratory studies that do show that it can reduce the ability of a virus to spread. These are studies that have been done in a laboratory. It has never been tested on a very large and massive scale, but it does show promise as something that might be able to help. Again, this is a strategy that can help. And so it is also the most cost-effective strategy. When you get right down to it, things like increasing the amount of outside air you bring into a building and increasing filtration have large cost impacts, whereas this is an option that is fairly cost-effective and within reach. So essentially, that kind of summarizes the end of it. Do you want to discuss cost this time?
Just to maybe add a little bit to that, both of the newer systems that have been installed utilize quite a bit of outside air through the system.
Yes.
Also, that's the case at the middle school and the Huntertown and Simmons. They have the geothermal systems in place already. So there is some outside air. There is some outside air that is filtrated through at the high school. It is an older system, however. What this is intended to do, and you've probably seen the advertisement for like the UV lights could be, and that was one of the options that we looked at. The issue with that is those have to be replaced probably on a yearly basis. And so you get into a lot more cost, whereas this particular system, again, has shown to have some effect on virus, so it's not just a COVID issue, it may be a flu issue as well. What Mr. Crawford shared with me is that some of the hospitals are looking at systems like this. And so, again, based on that, and based on the fact that it was brought up, we thought it was worthwhile to have a conversation to say, here are some things that we've researched. Again, nothing is cheap, but this is, we're probably looking in the $650,000 to $700,000 range to do all buildings.
And Mr. Reed, when you say that this has not been proven effective yet on large scale applications, what is the largest scale application that it has been proven effective?
So essentially they've done laboratory tests that show that, they'll put guinea pigs in a box, and with the ionizers on, the guinea pigs don't spread the virus. With them off, they do spread the virus. So it's one of those things where laboratory tests have been done. They have not yet had time to do a full scale. We've got this in an existing facility. Let's look at infection rates between a control and so they haven't, essentially the laboratory studies show promise that it can help, but it has not yet been proven on a large scale. They haven't done it in the real world per se.
Okay. And are those studies something that you could share the links with us so that we could take a look at that?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Springate?
I just wondered, are you pursuing these type projects with any other school districts, or do you know if any other districts have kind of gone down this path? Obviously we want to do everything we can to keep our kids safe, and it sounds like this kind of enhancement would help not only with COVID, but also with just general flu and other type viruses.
Yes.
So I just wondered if anyone else has kind of gone down that path, in Kentucky or in the nation.
Yeah, as you can imagine, there has been a lot of interest recently. To this point, I am not a CMTA aware of any school district that has implemented it district-wide as in this sort of an install. We have, as Mr. Hawkins stated, we've been installing in schools and hospitals for 5 to 7 years now. It is something that is widely applied in the industry, and it's something that people find great benefit in, but it is not yet something that has, to my knowledge, been addressed in this sort of a manner.
And are we able to find out the cost per unit? If we know that we have some schools that have better ventilation with outside air, is there an advantage to installing it in the schools that have the greatest need first? And also, I guess, in that line of thinking, is there any indication that it works better if you're looking at an older system because it's such an improvement, or does it need a certain level of quality to enhance something that's already good?
Yeah, I believe that at the end of the day, it does probably make sense to apply it at schools that are perhaps installed to older codes where you don't have the amount of outside air that you do in your newer facilities. And there are certainly, you can apply this particular technology.
It's not.
You can apply this particular technology in a variety of different, you can apply it unit by unit, meaning you don't have to do the entire school if you don't want to. You can apply it certainly you can apply it in your most needed areas. And so there is a way to strategically apply it. If you wanted to go with maybe a reduced cost option, yes. But that gets into a little bit of, it's how do you determine which spaces, necessarily, and which ones have it and don't have it. Could be, I guess, a point of discussion in terms of, but if generally we could make a recommendation for areas of the buildings that are less code compliant, and apply them in those areas first.
Okay, thank you. If you don't mind to turn around, there's 2 board members behind you on the computer, and we'll go to them next.
Okay.
Ms. Edelin?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins, for arranging this. First of all, I know Mr. Hawkins mentioned 650 to 700,000. Was that for this disinfection system, or was that for something else?
Yes, that's for this disinfection system. Apply
Okay.
to all schools
and that's the low cost remedy.
Yes, this is definitely
Okay.
the low cost remedy. Mm-hmm.
And that's going into every school and putting it in every unit. Okay. Did you say Debbie? I thought someone said Debbie. Okay. Of the 4, not thinking about cost, which one has been found to be the most effective when, protecting an air quality against a flu or virus or whatever?
You mean of the technologies that I mentioned?
Of the 4 you listed.
Yeah, so probably the most effective would be outside air, bringing in 100% outside air. I know of many hospitals that have applied a strategy where they bring in 100% outside air, just all fresh air into the facility. The issue is that's also the most expensive option. It would literally involve the replacement of every HVAC system in the school, just because.
Right, and we know how good those are. But as Mr. Hawkins said, we just did 2 of our elementaries recently, North Side and South Side. So did you test our schools, or did you go in and test the air quality, or?
I've done no on-site testing at this point, no.
Because, that's just curious that, we would think that those would be really good, like he said, because that's just probably happened in the last couple of years that we put new systems in there. And really, the place you're standing right now is the worry always. So I didn't know if.
And let me assure you, obviously the HVAC systems in your newer schools are built to the most current codes and do provide a good, safe, and healthy environment for schools. But at the same time, you have to realize as well that those schools were built under a non-pandemic world, where it's a whole different kind of game in terms of what you have to design.
And I think too that, like you said, these are supplements to what we're putting in place, which is masking and social distancing to the extent that we can. We may have a lot more kids coming back in January. I haven't seen the plan for that yet, but I feel like probably the high school is the most crowded, as well as having the least ventilation. So, okay.
Yeah.
Good to think about. I'll look at the links. I heard Danny say you asked for those, so thank you for coming.
Yeah, I'll share those. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for coming, sir, and have a nice day.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Hawkins, we'll move back to item B, please, salary discussion.
All right. Again, as a follow-up to some conversation that had been brought up at the prior meeting, we did do some cost study and looking at particularly initially our bus driver salaries, and just comparing districts around us. There is only one district that we are ahead of in terms of our bus driver salaries. And so as we looked at what may be a viable thing to consider, if you did roughly $1.25 increase per hour, that would put us ahead of every district with the exception of one. Now, that's going to cost in itself somewhere in the $60,000 range for just the initial base contract for our drivers. Obviously, there would be some additional costs passed on to schools because that would increase the rate per hour for our drivers for all trips at that point. So that's not the only cost. That may be the general fund cost, but it wouldn't be the only cost. Just as we've discussed this, though, I think there is a little bit of a struggle in just dealing with one group of employees and what that might do in terms of morale across the district. There are other areas that probably could be addressed. And so I think it's a quandary that we're in because I do think we do need to address salaries across the board. And we do need to address our bus drivers in particular. So that is what we have discovered up to this point. But again, I would be very hesitant to just look at one group.
And I think this question came up last week, but it probably bears repeating. Your thoughts on doing it for the substitute pay different because that is not an actual Woodford County School District employee per se. It's a...
And that is an issue that we have dealt with for a number of years in terms of our substitute issue. It is an area that we tried to address in a different manner last year, and that did not work. And I think based on conversations that Mr. Wells had, particularly with our retired teachers, because that is a group that we have struggled to entice to come back.
Sure.
And so this was an area that I think has needed to be addressed for some time. It's a very specific need that impacts all schools. And so, and again, the fact that we have not done raises over the last 3 to 4 years, and even when we did do raises before, we targeted a specific area of our salary schedule that didn't touch subs. So they've been bypassed. And so this was an attempt to, again, I think, really address a dire need. Bus drivers are a dire need as well. I don't think anybody would question that. It's a challenge right now, and it's going to continue to be a challenge. But I do think it would be detrimental to not look at something for others if we look at a particular group.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Ms. Springate?
Yes, just in the discussion about the salary, the bus drivers, and really also the ventilation tonight, it just occurs to me that this is what I have kind of been discussing over the past year and a half, the ramifications of using our capital outlay in our general funds, restricting those, so that now they're not available for us to be able to use for the raises that are really desperately needed, and the ventilation system too. I guess this is why districts use their general fund dollars for their staff and their students. And so it's really, I think, important and vital for us to really look at our priorities and really see that some of these things with the ventilation enhancements and the salary, the absolute necessity of having bus drivers, to really kind of look at that and kind of make a good plan. So I would just ask that both of these items be placed on our agenda next week for action.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Springate. Ms. Evelyn?
Yeah, Scott, so the $1.25 an hour, would put us very competitive, it sounds like. Do you think the real problem is that we're not competitive in salary, or is it that demographic that tends to take bus driver jobs are just not as willing right now or available? I know it would help, but do you think it's the core problem?
I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
I do think the salary piece is limiting our ability to maybe attract those who may be working in other districts right now.
That may be from Woodford County.
Or maybe who live on a border, that they live real close to the border in two counties, and this one pays more, so this is where they go and work. But also know that we do have some folks who traditionally we have been able to attract some folks who are retired who may want to come back. And so right now the pandemic is probably hurting that, but I do think the pay is a detriment when it comes to maybe attracting some people who are out of work right now. That might be a good, at least, source of income until they could find something else. So I think it's a combination of both.
Okay. And then how are we doing? Have you noticed any difference in subs since we took the action last month?
I know Mr. Wells has a training set up already. We've had several people interested. So he's actually got a training set up next week. So.
Okay. Good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Evelyn. Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, Mr. Superintendent Hawkins, thank you for looking into this problem. Are we still 10 bus drivers down?
I think we're 9. I am concerned what we may be facing at the first of the year.
What do you mean, sir?
Well, if we add more students back in person who need transportation, that could be problematic.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a question of if we add more, but when we add more. And the survey you and your staff conducted indicated that our pay is below everybody in our district with the exception of one district. And that if we raise the hourly rate by $1.25, that would put us above every district but one district. But you do not recommend that we do that because of the quandary of it would hurt morale in other areas.
I do believe it would be problematic if we did not do something for other employees as well.
All right. So you're recommending we don't do the bus drivers by themselves?
Yes, sir. That is that I would not recommend just doing one group by themselves.
And that's in total recognition of the fact that we have that a raise could attract, by your own admission, could attract more bus drivers from areas. It could attract unemployed people. We have our safety, we have our director and mechanics driving buses now. And in 2 months, we won't have enough bus drivers to meet the needs of our student population.
Again, I just think, I'm not saying it's not needed, sir. I'm saying I think we need to address some other areas as well. And so I think you've got to look at every employee, particularly with what folks have done, particularly over the last 7 months.
But with 9 bus drivers short, are there occasions to where bus drivers have to double up on routes and have even more students in a bus than they normally would?
We can't have more students than we normally would because we're limited on how many students can ride now, and that is contributing to the issue. Is that you are limited in the number of students who can ride at the current time. So it is it's a challenge for sure.
But if we do nothing to address the problem in October, what's the solution in January?
We will have to look at trying to be as creative as we can be. I don't have a set answer for you right now because I don't know what the issue may be.
It seems like the only answer it is to have more bus drivers. I don't know.
That is absolutely what we need. Is we do need more bus drivers. That is for sure.
But some may say it's short-sighted not to do what would be necessary to attract more bus drivers with the problems that are coming in January.
I think that's something that the board has to consider when they weigh that out compared to what we should do for other employees as well.
I have one more. I'm sorry.
Madam Vice Chairman or Madam Chairman, could either one of you put this on the agenda for next?
I think Ms. Frank did.
Yeah, I did ask.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good, thank you.
Oh, no.
I have one more question, Danny, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead, Ms. Evelyn.
Scott, do bus drivers and some of our other classified staff, do they get step increases every year?
Yes.
So if we started that amount at $1.25 an hour, like how is it comparable to what certified staff gets? Because certified staff gets a little bump every year. So our classified staff does as well?
Yes, they get, there is an increase each year. There's a step increase each year up through year 30 in the salary schedule for classified employees.
I didn't know if that worked as well with classified as certified. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Evelyn. Ms. Springate, I will go and then I'll come back to you if that's okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Hawkins, when you mentioned the other groups that might be ill affected by this, who are you thinking of?
I think every employee.
Across the board, certified?
Yes.
Okay. And so we know that the cost of giving a raise across the board is around $240,000 a year. I think
it's 220.
I think we initially said 220 and then it bumped up after looking at the last set of raises that we did, but that neck of the woods. So your thought is that it would need to be an across the board increase?
I think you could deal with your drivers separately and then look at something for across the board for everyone else.
Okay, and would you advocate for doing that right now or in the next budget year? What are your thoughts?
I think if you were going to do it, I think you would do it as a retroactive back to July 1.
Okay, for everyone.
Yes.
And do you have, so the cost on that, we know the 240, or we can say 220, that's fine. Is that including a portion of this 60,000?
No.
So
the 220 or 240, 230
sure.
Is basically the cost of a 1% across the board. So you would back out whatever amount out of that 220 would be for bus drivers, and then you would add the 60,000 to that. So my guess is you would be somewhere in the 260 range to 275 for what the cost would be.
Okay. And
if you were to do a 1%.
Okay. And I know that our bus drivers have a lot of additional duties, as do a lot of our other employees during this pandemic time, as far as doing their paperwork has been increased, 100-fold with doing the seating charts and things like that. And I do think that making their wage competitive is a very important. And to Ms. Springgate's point, I absolutely hear what you're saying about the restriction of funds that we have in place, but I also heard Mr. Hawkins' presentation at our last meeting, and we're looking at a deficit of $2.6 million if the budget cuts that he foresees happen. We only have $350,000, and we've been over this restricted, but I just do want to make sure that we're not making it appear as though having that $350,000 is the difference between doing either a raise or an ionization upgrade for our HVAC units. It's a bigger deficit than that.
Well, I definitely appreciate what you're saying.
Danny, I'm sorry. I have another question.
Okay,
Go ahead.
just a moment.
Sorry,
We'll come
a little
back.
bit of a lag.
That's okay. It's hard when you're doing virtual. I appreciate what you're saying, but just really to kind of fact check that, I went ahead and wrote down some numbers because that has been brought up before. And I just kind of wanted to go over this just so that the public's very aware of what these funds are and how this works. So basically, the cash that has been utilized for the high school project breaks down like this. We have $600,000 of general fund dollars that we restricted in 1920. That's $600,000. We have $545,000 cash in our capital outlay fund. That's $545,000. We also have $700,000 that we restricted from general fund, the $350 you talked about for the past 2 years. So that's a total of $1,845,000. So I just want to be clear when we're talking about this, it's not just $350,000. It's $350,000 times 20 years, but it's also these other impacts that we have. And so when I said about the capital outlay, when I'm talking about utilizing that for the ventilation, what I'm saying is when we took 80% of our capital outlay, that's the money the state gives us to do repairs, to do updates, to do things that make sure that we have the safest and most up-to-date systems possible for our students. When we get that cash from the state every year, that is cash that we utilize to do capital projects. And so we have right now on our budget $545,000 sitting in that account, which would almost pay for this ventilation update. So I just want to be really clear with the public. We're not just talking about $350,000.
Sure.
We're also talking about 80% of capital outlay, and as I kind of just went through and described.
Okay.
The other thing was I just wanted to ask that we put on the agenda as another option for this next week to have the 1% across the board retroactive increase for all staff back to July 1 as an agenda item for next week so that we can also have that for possible action, please.
Okay.
Ms. Bradley,
Ms. Ela.
can we check with Mr. Chenoweth as to whether or not we can give a retroactive pay raise? I'm not sure we can do that. I think I learned that at something, but I need clarification.
Just a moment.
Good evening.
Hi, Graham.
Can you all hear me all right?
Yes.
It is a violation of the Kentucky Constitution to give retroactive pay raises to public employees. It's deemed to be a gift, which is prohibited by Section 3 of the Kentucky Constitution. Because essentially those individuals agreed to perform certain work for a certain dollar figure. That work has already been done. That dollar figure has already been paid. So giving them more money now for work, for work already completed is an unconstitutional expenditure. I hate giving that answer, but that's KDE's advice as well. So there is just no such thing legally as a retroactive pay raise to public employees.
This is Sherry. Can I take that out of my...
Thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you, Ms.
Please
Ela.
take that part out about the retroactive and leave the rest. Thank you, Debbie. I certainly wouldn't want to put a motion on that's not legal or against the advice of our attorney. So we just take the retroactive part of it out and then just leave the rest, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Springate. I would ask Mr. Hawkins that if you possible, could you send us the numbers on the cost from now going forward?
Sure.
Thank you. I think that would be helpful to have before next week. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of that agenda item. We're going to move on now to the regular agenda. And item A.
Can I ask a question, Graham?
Yeah.
Okay. So if other districts have done a retroactive pay raise and they adjusted their salary schedule, are you saying that was illegal? Because I know other districts have done it before. And so I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, that has come up several times recently, and it depends on how the specific practices is done. But for example, if you just took a salaried position and said their salary for the current year is going to be raised from, 50,000 to 60,000, but they've already earned a percentage of that 50,000, it ought to be prorated. It ought to be how much of the year is remaining, how much of the contract is remaining, and then that percentage of $60,000 can be paid to them going forward. But looking backwards at the July, August, September, October time that has already been performed, you can't just take 60,000 and divide it now across the number of pay periods remaining and essentially make up for lost time by paying the balance of 60,000 between now and next June 30th, because that is what amounts to a retroactive pay raise. I agree with you that I've seen and heard it done.
Okay.
If they ask for our guidance or if they ask for KDE with a mother may I, the answer should have been no.
Okay.
And we can talk through the logistics of that and some ways to address that, but doing just a pure retroactive July 1 annual pay raise is not the way to do it.
Okay. Is there a way to do a 1% from this point forward so that they would get the full amount?
If you do that so that they get the full amount, then you would essentially either be
2% next year.
Well, it's not that. It's the problem of adjusting that for next year, because you're essentially saying they're getting 1% more, but for only 8 months of the year remaining. And then next year that would divide out across 12 months and they would take a pay cut, essentially. I mean, we can discuss that some more if you want. I can share with you some examples, but there really isn't a great way to do that without, you'd have to come up with the formula of what percent would allow them to realize a 1% raise between now and the end of the year. And then at the end of the year, you would have to undo that point whatever increase so that in subsequent years, it was only a 1% increase. So it becomes a little bit tricky to try to make that work out. But
Okay.
Okay, ready to move on?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. We'll begin the regular agenda. Item A, approve the treasurer's fidelity bond.
Obviously, we have a new chief operating officer, Mr. Martello, and we are required to have a fidelity bond for him. And so we would ask for you to approve that.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the treasurer's fidelity bond?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second. Oh, go ahead.
The motion's made by Ms. Springate and seconded by Ms. Evelyn. All those in favor say aye. Ms. Springate?
Aye.
Aye. Ms. Evelyn?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
Aye.
And I vote aye. The motion carries 4-0. And I have that here, and we'll take care of that tonight. Next item is item B, approve fundraiser request.
Yes, we did have a fundraiser from our high school football team, and they would like to start just as soon as they possibly can with that, and so we would ask for your approval.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor to approve the football fundraising request. Motion made by Mr. Wilson and seconded by Ms. Springate. Ms. Springate, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Evelyn, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion is approved 4-0. Item C is discuss the facility plan process and related architect services, and this was put on by Ms. Evelyn.
Yes, I brought this up because I think there's some confusion. I just want to make sure that we are all on track with what we need to do for our district facility plan. I've asked our architect to come tonight because they're so well versed in all this process. Mr. Locke has kind of been asking us over the last couple of months what's happening with our K-Fix, which Mr. Locke, jump in anytime. My understanding is an audit that we do of all of our facilities. And I guess first of all, we need to know who is responsible for completing that audit. I think Ms. Jacobs was working on it. Is that right, Mr. Hawkins?
That is correct.
And was this something that she started prior to us hiring Ross Tarrant?
Yes.
Okay. Is there and so because she's working on it, she has the access to the site with the information about our buildings. I don't think Ross Tarrant does. So when is the date? So she started working on this prior to us hiring Ross Tarrant in March of 2019. So how long is that process going to be, and when is the date that that needs to be completed?
I've reached out to Ms. Jacobs, and she was, Amoresco is the group that had performed the audits. And so she was checking with them to see if those were available to be downloaded. And then she also needed to speak with our facility supervisor, Mr. Burnett. And so I have sent Mr. Burnett, I talked to him about reaching out to Ms. Jacobs to find out what all she needed from him, and in the hopes that this would be completed as soon as possible.
And has she?
Okay, and it's imperative, my understanding, and I'm just trying to be transparent for everybody and make sure that, so everybody kind of knows where we are on this, what I've been learning a little bit lately. We need this document, this audit, to create our district facility plan. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. You agree with that, Mr. Locke?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Our district facility plan is due in June of 2021. We have not begun the process yet. Anybody who served on that facility planning committee, and I know I did maybe 8 years ago, it's a very long process. Who is going to do the district facility plan? I think the board needs to tell their intent on that. If Mr. Locke is going to take that over, I guess I was unaware, and I don't necessarily have any problem with it, but I was unaware that we still had another architect performing some services for us. So I think we just need to be really clear who's responsible for what, because I know Ross Tarrant has been a little just wanting to know what they're going to be responsible for, because starting the district facility plan right now, it's going to be a rush to get it done by June 2021. And we all know, and I think every architect we interviewed a year and a half ago told us, you really need to work on your district facility plan, because that is what the state, our unmet need on that plan is what the state bases our state funding on. And so we don't want to be coming in late with it. We don't want people ahead of us in line. So I just wanted to bring this up tonight so that we know where we're at in this process, and maybe we can get reports going forward every meeting where we are and how we're doing. Kevin, or Scott, is there anything I said wrong or anything?
No, that's correct, Ms. Evelyn. I think the process, now that we're responsible for doing or an architect is responsible for doing the K-fix, it's taking a little bit longer than previously. And also the deadline to submit to KDE for the June of 2021 KBE is 45 days in advance of that. So everything has to be submitted.
What do you mean the KDE?
Kentucky Board of Education.
Oh, okay. So really, the June date is more like the middle of May or middle of April?
Middle of April, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, which our plan was to have the facilities plan completed if we were going to do it this year. And I've reached out to KDE. Just with the pandemic, it'll be a very different process than what we've utilized in the past. And I want to make sure that we can be as thorough as possible. And I know that other districts who had been dealing with it last year, some of them are just now completing it. And so it has been a much longer process because of the pandemic. But we are still, I think, in a position to be able to move that forward. I actually had contacted KSBA because they do provide some consulting services. It's now through the Kentucky Plant Managers Association that they would be able to assist us as well. And so, of course, that committee is set out in statute in terms of the makeup of that committee. Again, what we have traditionally done is taken at least a couple of days to have people visit schools. I don't know that is even feasible this year while students are in session.
Could they not go in on the weekend?
That is a possibility if committee members want to give up their weekends, and we have bus drivers who would take them around because we've typically taken them on buses around to the different sites. That has been our past practice, how we've handled the last 2 facilities plans. And so, again, it's going to look a lot different this year. Some of it may have to be conducted virtually, which I think this process would be much more difficult to do virtually than it would to do it in person. Then you also get into, it's a 20-member committee, which then you would have open meetings. So again, it's a complex process. And so again, I have reached out to KDE to see about any flexibility in terms of timelines and timing, given what we're facing this year. I have not heard back yet.
Okay.
But is it, Mr. Hawkins, is your plan for Ms. Jacobs and our personnel to finish up their project and then hand that information off to Kevin and Ross Tarrant to begin the facility plan procedures?
Yes, once the KFIX piece is completed, then I had assumed that Kevin would be, since he is currently our architect, that he would be the one involved with the facilities planning process.
Good.
Okay. I think it would be helpful if maybe you and Kevin can get a schedule. I know it's going to look different than prior, district facility plan schedules, but kind of, Kevin, are you working on any of these for any other districts right now?
Yeah, I'm working on 3 of these currently.
Okay, so you kind of familiar with what KDE is thinking, but if you guys could just get a plan so that the board could see just the dates, because again, I don't want us to come in late, obviously, and then I just think we'd all feel better, all of us, not just board members, if we knew kind of how this was going to play out over the next few months. So maybe if you could get that together and even an idea of it and get it to us next Monday, does that sound good?
Absolutely, we can pull that together, and just to address Mr. Hawkins' concerns, it is a different process now, a little bit different than what Woodford County does typically, as far as taking LPC members to the various different schools and touring those. I will say that most of the districts that I do not do that. I think it's a great idea that Woodford County does try to do that. It may be something that is a casualty of the current pandemic environment that we won't be able to do those types of things. The other thing that I think is important to note is that in my conversations with Mr. Dunbar, the facilities branch manager at KDE, getting in these DFPs is going to be on a first come, first served basis as far as getting KDE to review these. So I think time is of the essence in order to get these submitted to KDE, because my understanding is there's 90 some odd districts that are looking at the same June of 21 deadline. So I think anything that the district could do to expedite that would benefit them in the long run.
Okay. Well, and of course I want to hear from the other board members on this, but again, my desire would be by next Monday to really have a firm handle on what kind of schedule we have, what we could be doing now, and how to play out, and just what KDE is thinking about extending deadlines or whatever. So or change in just what the process is going to be, and then how we're going to fit our dates with that process.
Yeah, I can get that to you tomorrow. That's not a big deal for us to put that.
Okay, we can work with Mr. Hawkins too and make sure you all are on the same page. Okay? Okay. Thank you, Danny.
I do have some questions on this, just so the public is aware. We're talking about the DFP, which is the District Facilities Plan. We use these acronyms and assume everyone knows. Mr. Hawkins, the last DFP was before Ms. Richardson and I joined the board. How long do they typically take?
It was about a 6-month process.
Okay. And do you head that committee?
No, I do not. I am a non-voting member.
Okay, so who heads up that committee?
It's typically been our chief operating officer.
Okay.
But the committee is very prescriptive in terms of how many of each category serve on it. Again, it's a 19-person committee. I'm the 20th person as a non-voting member.
Okay, and do you, in the past, have you been the one to seek out the people to serve on the committee?
Yes.
Okay, and is that something that you could do?
I won't be able to do it by next Monday.
No, I was going to ask, how long do you need to do that?
It takes a few weeks.
Sure.
But I mean, we can certainly move that along.
Okay, that sounds good. Especially,
and that's what I'm thinking, just kind of a timeline of when these different steps will be done. So.
Sure, and what I was going to say is, especially if it's a first come, first serve type process at KDE.
Let me just clarify that. Danny, Mr. Locke, when you said that, I think that what we heard might be different than what you intended. So when we turn these district facility plans into KDE, are you saying that whoever turns it in first gets the most money, or are you just saying whoever turns it in first gets it reviewed? Because I think there might be some confusion with board members.
Yeah, it's just the review of it.
That's what I.
So it doesn't have anything to do with the money, although there is deadlines for getting it, because obviously the legislature has a July 1st deadline for their funding for the unmet need, which is part of your SFCC offers of assistance that you get from the state. So, you know, it's a little bit different nowadays, or this particular year, because I think the legislature is planning on meeting this coming, I'm not sure what the legislature is doing as far as when they're going to be meeting and the funding, but it's typically done on every odd year, and July 1st is the deadline. And if you do not have an updated DFP in the system that has been approved, then what the KDE folks will do typically is they will look at all of the BG1s that you have submitted, in other words, all the projects that you committed to, and they will take those amounts off of your current DFP, and that's what will be submitted to the legislature.
Yeah, so just to clarify, if we turn in our report on time, then we're not getting any extra funds, we're not getting any dings, anything like that.
Well, it all depends on what the unmet need is, and I'm not privy to what the KFIX information is coming up with as far as what the unmet need will be. So that's the issue. Typically, you like to have your architect, one architect do both the KFIX and the DFP, but this is a little bit different situation here. I'm not privy to the KFIX information, so I don't have any idea what the repair items and costs are going to be that were generated by Tateville Jacobs when they did the KFIX assessments.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hawkins, do you have anything further?
Mm-hmm.
Any other board members? All right, we will move on to reviewing our board agenda for next week. Can we do the treasurer's report?
Sure. Mr. Martello?
Oh, welcome.
Well, yes, welcome, Mr. Martello.
Good evening. Just going to present the normal monthly reports. If anybody has any questions. Yes, just presenting the monthly reports and the financial piece. If anybody has any questions, I'm here to answer those.
Thank you.
I don't think he was going to read through it, but I mean,
Oh,
it's
okay,
just,
I'm sorry. In the past, Ms. Smith would read through the fund balances, so that's what we were all waiting for.
1 second, sorry about that.
Madam Vice Chair, did our Chief Operating Officer ask if we had any questions?
He did.
I have no questions, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Evelyn, are you able to see this?
I'm fine with it.
Okay. Ms. Springate?
I didn't have any questions. I did just want to kind of look over the box where we talk about our CARES fund and our contingency. Do you have it pulled up? Do you mind just reviewing that, just the box about
I do. Yes.
I think that's just something the public's interested
Sure.
in hearing those numbers each time. If you
Sure.
don't mind.
On the CARES and on that piece, that 482,000 and 482,885.51, that reflects the encumbrance and the expenditures of the awarded. It's roughly 500, about $500,000 that was awarded for the first pot of CARES money, and then there's also that second pot. But basically, the vast majority of those funds have already been encumbered and or expended that were awarded specifically for the COVID pandemic.
And just to clarify on that, I believe we spent a lot of it on our PPE. That was kind of the initial big ticket items through that, and then we allocated the rest of it, which was around $250,000 for the sanitization.
now we had some other expenditures, encumbrances already. I think we have about 143 available for the sanitization.
Okay. And while we're talking about that, has that been going well?
I believe so. Mr. Wells has been working with that company. They have been coming in on Sunday nights and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday nights. By all reports, I think that has been well received.
I will say I had a high school teacher stop and say that it's the cleanest that the school has ever been. So huge thanks to all of our regular custodial staff as well as the nighttime cleaning as well. And then the Gears Fund, Mr. Martello?
Yes, ma'am. It's roughly a little bit over 85,000 that was awarded for that piece, or I'm sorry, about 88. And so that's being spent, and those are the encumbrances in the form of a PO and or expense year to date for that number.
And that, I believe, was technology earmarked. Is that right, Mr. Hawkins?
Technology and food service.
Okay. All right.
So we have about half of those funds available.
Okay. Ms. Springate, is there anything else you want to do on that one?
No, thank you. I just think it's important for us to kind of look at that number and kind of keep it to the forefront of our mind because, it was really wonderful and a gift to receive those funds. And
Yes.
so, I think it's just nice to kind of review that and see how the district has utilized that and how that's really helped
Sure.
with the crisis and the pandemic. So thank you.
And I want to point out too, we have an obligation being a public entity with those title funds and those federal dollars. That we have a responsibility for our local friends that are in the private school element where we have to be the facilitator for those dollars and facilitate the purchases and or salary expenditures for any federal fund. So just know those numbers may fluctuate
Sure.
as we start to finish out those funds with any federal fund and specifically COVID. We do have two entities that are utilizing those services because it falls under the Title I regulations and rules.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. And hopefully any future aid packages that might make it through our House and Senate will include some additional funding. I think it's there now, but that doesn't mean it will be there tomorrow. But yes, thank you so much.
I'd like to also note on the one-to-one insurance balance, those were some larger amounts over the years, but again, since we're going in the virtual environment, we've had, that's supposed to be a self-funded balance, and it is, but we are seeing that balance being reduced because with the virtual environment, with more Chromebooks and electronic devices, there are broken screens, there are issues with those things where that self-funded piece is coming down a little bit. So just as a note.
Thank you.
And you're used to the one more thing on the building fund. That was new to me in terms of that negative cash balance, so that 900,000
Scary.
until that tax levy is applied and in the November when those levies are coming in. You guys are well aware of that.
Yes, we've had the sticker shock before.
Yes. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Hawkins, would you like to take us through the consent agenda?
Sure. If you look, the first item on the consent agenda are donation requests, and I think all but one of those is monetary in nature, supporting several different programs in several of our schools. So
I want to say this was a big month for donations, and obviously we are profoundly grateful to everyone that has donated to the schools. I saw some of them are specifically earmarked for health and mental well-being, and those are obviously wonderful, especially now. So thank you to everyone that made those donations.
okay, the next item are fundraisers, and we just have a few this time. High school choir, middle school pictures, and middle school volleyball. We have several non-resident contracts, I believe, this month. And again, those are done typically well in advance, and those are districts that we have previous agreements with. I skipped over travel requests because we still don't have any. The next item is the approval of the contract, and that is for our sanitizing, disinfecting company that we are utilizing. Mr. Chenoweth has reviewed that, and so we are submitting that for your approval this month. Item F is we are adding a few teachers to our list of folks who can chair ARC and 504 meetings, and Ms. Francis has put that together and is recommending that for your approval. We have a few technology surplus items, and these are end-of-life electronics and technology equipment. And then the next item is the approval of the makeup of the calendar committee. We're actually getting ready to be in that work for next year already. So Mr. Wells, that is a statutory makeup of that committee, and so we have that on for your approval as well.
Okay. I did have one question on that one. Ms. Sprigate, I saw that you were designated as the board representative. Is that something you want to continue?
I certainly am willing to do. It's a very good committee, but if you or Ms. Richardson are interested in doing that, I'm more than happy to step aside and allow you guys to have that experience too. It really is a good committee.
Either way, it's fine. We can discuss that. I just wanted to make sure I saw your name on there. All right. Moving on to the regular agenda.
Pretty short list of regular agenda items. We have notification of personnel matters. That's everything that's happened since the last board meeting. Item B is the notification of payment of bills. Item C is the approval of meeting minutes for September the 10th, which was our public hearing to set tax rates and the special meeting, and then our meetings on September 21st and September 28th. And then item D is the RFP for an attorney. And I did have some conversation with Mr. Chenoweth, and I don't know if RFP is the right terminology, Grant. It's maybe an RFQ, so a request for quote.
Okay.
But it would be basically drafting a letter. And so I think what this item, and we may want to change the wording, is that basically it would authorize district staff to solicit quotes from potential attorneys.
Okay. And I put this on the agenda after we all received a letter from the Chenoweth Law Firm. I'm fine with making those changes for next week's agenda item. Is there a process that they follow to send it to some sort of a listserv of education attorneys, or how does that work?
I'd probably have to get with Grant to find out who all there are not many school attorneys in Kentucky in terms of firms who do that, but we would certainly try to send that out to anybody who may have some interest in participating.
Okay, and is the letter something that you will prepare, Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
I just have a quick question on that one. That would seem to be something that we have the Chenoweths through December, through the end of the year. So that would seem to be something that I definitely think we should start getting some information about, but I do believe that would be something that the new board in January would probably want to have some input on and to be able to make that decision.
I'm absolutely fine with the new board making the final decision. What I was hoping to avoid was any lag in coverage or lapse in coverage, because if it's a lengthy process, because we have to do so many different steps, I wanted to make sure that we had the process in place to get that going.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And I think, again, it makes good sense to kind of be proactive and to have some of that stuff done. But I appreciate that you're willing to wait until January to allow the new board to kind of be involved in those discussions and decisions and the actual hiring of the new attorney firm. So that sounds great. Thank you.
And obviously, this is a decision that isn't just made by Ms. Springate and myself. Ms. Evelyn, is that acceptable to you?
Of course, yes. I agree with both of your points that the new board should make this decision, but that we want to avoid a lapse. So it's going to be a little bit of a tight wire, but I agree with both those points.
And Mr. Wilson?
I just heard maybe every fourth or fifth word of what Ms. Burngate said, but I think she said that the new board in January should select the new attorney. Is that what I heard her say?
That's correct.
Yeah, and I would wholeheartedly agree with that. But I think that as someone who is leaving in just 2 months, Ms. Evelyn and I, and quite possibly 3 new members, I think that we should use that same philosophy that was just espoused by Ms. Springate on many decisions that might be made these last 2 or 3 months. And I would even go a step further in saying something as an across-the-board salary increase that could be $250,000, $250,000. And you have to remember, too, we'll have a new superintendent.
Mr. Wilson, you have said that now 4 times, and I have not made any announcement.
All right.
And so
okay, I'll rephrase it, sir. There is a possibility, just like we may have 3 new members or 2 members, we may have a new superintendent, and it may be helpful to put off many of our decisions, if they're crucial, until that next time, in order that the new board may have an opportunity to weigh in on these decisions that will have an impact on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Hawkins, did you have further thoughts?
No.
Okay. That is the end of the regular agenda, which would bring us to our discussion items. Mr. Wilson, in the interest of time and you being virtual, would you like to table your impact survey discussion item?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And Ms. Evelyn, the same thing for item C, update on advisory committee for a high school. Would you rather do that in person or would you like to do that tonight? You're muted.
You're muted, Debbie.
Hope to have that next week. Yes, I will table that till next week, yes.
Okay, and then item, we already covered the equity audit. I don't want anyone to think that I'm skimming over that. Were there any board members that had any further thoughts on the equity audit? Ms. Springate?
No, I believe we discussed.
Okay, Ms. Evelyn?
No.
Mr. Wilson?
No, thank you.
Thank you, I have none. The last item on the agenda is item D, reporting of numbers of quarantined and positive tests in the schools. Ms. Evelyn, you asked for this. Is this something you would like to do tonight, or would you like to table?
Well, let me just ask one question, because I have been getting questions from the public. Okay. So I thought it would be helpful to, say it in an open meeting and be so everybody can hear the answers. The only, I have been hearing that there's, people feel like things aren't being reported, whatever. So I thought it would just be really clear, and I know we've talked about this before, Mr. Hawkins, but we could just kind of lay out what exactly is reported. I know we discussed it on the 28th that anything that happened before the 27th was not going to be reported. Every day the dashboard just contains what happened that day. It's not a running total. I think that's still kind of confusing for people, so I just want to clarify that in an open meeting. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
You can actually, though, click on the COVID-19 tab on the website, and you can go and look by school, by day. So they can see actually every day that what has been reported in terms of quarantines for kids, for staff, cases for kids and staff. And so that is kept on the website each day. But according to the regulation, we are to report that from the previous 24 hours. Now, on a Monday, if we are made aware of something anytime over the weekend, that does get reported on that Monday. And
even if it's on Saturday, even if it's outside that 24 hours?
If it happens, you know, we were made aware of the quarantines related to the middle school football team late Saturday evening. That was reported today. So,
okay.
So
yes,
if it is,
that's all I really had on that. I just wanted to I think we just can't say it enough. It is confusing for people sometimes. So that's really what I wanted to do, was just say it and
part
make sure I was clear and everybody was clear.
I think.
Do you want to say anything else about it, Mr. Hawkins, that might be helpful to the public?
Yeah, I think Mr. Chenoweth was quite eloquent a couple of weeks ago when he talked about what the regulation requires. The other issue is that we get made aware of quarantines, but we don't always know the first day that quarantine started. And so there is no way for us to keep a running total, particularly of the quarantines, because of that fact. And so that's why it's anything that occurred in the previous 24 hours that we report that next day. And it's only days that we're in session. So we did not have any reporting while we were out for fall break. And so
did you pick up anything like if somebody got tested positive over fall break, were they included in the statistics on Monday?
No, we did not do that for that Monday. Unless it happened over the weekend. Now, if we were made aware of something, we did do our normal notifications. So, you know, if we had a positive case, we still notified parents. Now, it was via email and letter home mailed, as opposed to a letter sent home with their child. But we still did.
But it wasn't on the dashboard, and that was because
it was fall break and we weren't in session.
Okay.
How many, Mr. Superintendent, since the start of in-class instruction, how many positive cases have we had of employees and students?
I'm aware of one positive employee, one positive, and I think it's less than 5 positive students.
So we've had one employee and 5 or less, probably 5 students.
I'd have to go through and look at all the totals, but it has been a very, very small number.
Good. That's very good news.
Okay, wrapping up.
That's it. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Ms. Edelin. And those numbers, I think, are a huge testament to the work that all of our employees are putting in, our office staff, our nurses, all of our support staff, our aides, our central office staff, teachers, administrators, bus drivers, cafeteria workers. Every single person is being so diligent to keep our kids and their fellow employees safe. And I know I speak for the entire board when I say thank you so much for everything that you're doing and that you will continue to do advocate for our kids. It's very much appreciated. And I think that brings us to a close tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
There's a motion to adjourn by Mr. Wilson and a second by Ms. Springate. Ms. Springate?
Aye.
Ms. Edlin?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.